In order to truly understand the importance of the Camp David Accords, it is necessary to know the history of the Arab-Israeli conflict. Post-World War I, the Allies broke up the Ottoman Empire into what is now the Middle East. America was highly dependent on the Middle East for oil, yet the countries remained extremely poor. After World War II, many European Jews were displaced and unable to return to their homes. So, the United Nations formed the State of Israel. This region of the Middle East was occupied by Palestinian Arabs, primarily Muslims, who felt that their land was being taken over by the Jews. Soon after being established, Israel declared itself independent. The first war of many in the Arab-Israeli conflict began. After the First Arab-Israeli War in 1948, over 750,000 Arab refugees either fled or were removed from their homes by force. The Arabs were outraged because they were not allowed to go back to Israel. So, the Palestinians fought for the Palestinian right of return. The Palestinians wanted the ability to return to their homeland of many years, since Jews who never lived in Israel could go as they pleased. This act allowed the Palestinian refugees and their descendants to return back to Israel after the war. The Suez Canal crisis of 1956 began with the Egyptian foreign minister's visit to Washington, D.C. to discuss building the Aswan Dam on the Nile River. When he arrived, he was completely ignored, and it was announced that America would no longer back the dam. Nasser decided to take the Suez Canal for Egypt because the country felt that it belonged to them. This violated the agreement Egypt had with Great Britain and France, who owned the canal and gave Egypt money to pay for the dam. Nasser also reached out to the USSR to back the dam, which the United Nations could not accept for the sake of containment. Also wanting to use the canal, Israeli troops invaded Egypt. Egypt was allowed to nationalize the Suez Canal by the United Nations. Great Britain and France lost most of their Middle East influence, and Israel lost its freedom to use the canal. Nasser was a hero to Egypt and the Arab world, and Palestinian nationalism soared. The 6 Days War lasted from June 5th to June 10th, 1967. The war was started with a preemptive strike by Israel because of the growing suspicion of an Arab attack. The Soviet Union had been giving Arab nations advanced weapons for years and was encouraging war. Israel won the war, but at high cost. Fanatical Palestinian nationalism surged, and the Arabs would not rest until their lost territory was given back to them. They lost the Sinai Peninsula, which they had for over 5,000 years, the Gaza Strip, and Jerusalem, a holy city to Muslims. Israel had become overconfident militarily and thought they were invincible. The most moderate Arab states were turned against Israel. The Yom Kippur War of 1973 was a heavy blow to the Israelis because of an Arab attack occurring on the Day of Atonement for the Jews. The war further damaged relations between the U.S. and the USSR, almost leading to war between the two nations and the countries they backed. The USSR threatened to attack Israeli troops surrounding Arab troops. A ceasefire by the United Nations was announced to avoid any more fighting. The Arabs were defeated, yet were successful in the beginning of the war. This led to the beginning of peace negotiations between President Anwar Sadat of Egypt and Prime Minister Menachem Begin of Israel. Egypt and Israel signed an agreement for peace without military action. Jimmy Carter was a peace-seeking president who wanted to see stability in the Middle East and its relations. Carter and President Anwar Sadat of Egypt compromised that the Sinai Peninsula be returned to Egypt. Both leaders wanted a stronger relationship between Egypt and Israel. Prime Minister Menachem Begin of Israel agreed to these terms. During the 12 days spent negotiating at Camp David in Maryland, Anwar Sadat of Egypt threatened to leave over land disputes. Jimmy Carter told him that their friendship was over if he left, and that the relationship between Egypt and America had taken a serious blow. He was furious, since Sadat promised not to leave until peace was reached. Sadat decided to stay and finish the discussion. The accords also called for a formal peace treaty to be signed between the two countries, known today as the Egypt-Israeli Peace Treaty. The Camp David Accords were signed on September 17, 1978. Sadat was assassinated, and there were assassination attempts towards Begin after making peace, only a few years apart. They were seen as traitors to citizens, while Carter was seen as a hero. The terms of the accords are as follows. It called for a formal peace treaty between Israel and Egypt, the establishment of diplomatic relations between the two countries, Israeli withdrawal from the Sinai Peninsula, further meetings to resolve the Palestinian question, Israeli withdrawal from the West Bank and Gaza, the introduction of Palestinian self-government, and an end to Israeli settlements in the West Bank. The accords did not settle the question of Jerusalem. Since then, there have been no wars fought between Israel and Arab nations. Cultural issues are still prevalent in society, yet fighting between nations has decreased greatly. The Camp David Accords influenced the Middle East and avoided more problems and potential war between the U.S. and the USSR. Overall, the Camp David Accords were successful.